Recently, I had an experience with credit card fraud that caused so much unnecessary stress and anxiety. I spent hours on the phone and in chats with my credit card company. I had to get two different cards before the fraud stopped, and I was so worried about what was going to happen to my money in my bank account. And I sometimes have the fear that it's going to happen again, right? And that's why I'm so excited to introduce You Are the Healer's newest sponsor, Aura, an app for protecting online data and personal information. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access things like my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Protecting yourself and your personal information is a form of self-care, I swear. Go to my sponsor, aura.com/healer to get a 14-day free trial and have peace of mind knowing your information is safe. Again, that's Aura, AURA.com/healer for your 2-week free trial. You Are the Healer is sponsored by BetterHelp. Therapy is mandatory because there's absolutely nothing wrong with seeking help. I think every person who walks this earth needs therapy, honestly. I'm stoked to be connected with BetterHelp to offer affordable and accessible therapy resources. The link is in my show notes, and you can also go to betterhelp.com/healer. That's better, HELP.com/healer. Now let's get into this episode.
Hi, besties. Before we dive into the episode, I just want to provide a quick disclaimer. You Are the Healer is here for empowerment, storytelling, and those aha moments, but it is not a substitute for therapy, medical advice, or professional help. I'm sharing my experiences, education, and opinions to support you, not to diagnose you. Everything you hear on the show is for informational and educational purposes only. You are responsible for your own choices, healing journey, and how you apply what resonates. If you need deeper support, please reach out to a qualified professional that can support you on your healing journey. All right, disclaimers done. Let's dive into this episode. Welcome back to You Are the Healer. I'm so excited to introduce our next guest. This is the season of the Borrowed Mind, so it's all guest episodes. And I'm so stoked to introduce Gabby. Gabby is the founder of Cosmically Aligned Coaching, where she focuses on self-discovery and personal growth. And that's like my bread and butter, baby. So I'm so excited. Gabby, thank you for being on the show.
Hi, Sydney. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk about the millions of things I know we're going to cover today.
I know. I'm like, our Venn diagram, I feel like really overlaps. So I'm like, I don't even know where to start. But we've talked a little bit off the record. So let's catch the listeners up. Tell me a little bit about you and how you got interested in healing.
Okay, wow. So I feel like for a lot of people who go into like healing, healthcare, like it's just very innate in you from like a very young age. From early on, like in my teenage years, I had an interest in mental health. I went to undergrad at Auburn University, and at the
Okay.
time I did my degree in health services administration. It had some like complicated acronym, but it was basically
Right.
just like healthcare administration and like a business minor because I was like, okay,
Okay.
healthcare, but I didn't want to be a doctor because I feel like when you think about healthcare, you're like, okay, doctor route, medical school, didn't love science and biology.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, let me try see another route. So I was like, okay, the business side, my
Mhm.
school had that major and I hadn't really heard of it. And so I was like,
Nice.
this is sweet. And we did a lot of like health law, policy, like that type of stuff. And it was okay. I like didn't like love it, but I was like, whatever, let me just finish this up. And then I
Mhm.
doing an internship at the American Academy of HIV Medicine. And
Okay.
this was like COVID times.
Mhm.
And so initially I was supposed to go to DC and do that in the summer of 2020 because that's when I graduated college.
Mhm.
And then unfortunately I couldn't go there, but I still just did it like remotely.
Yeah.
And while I was there, someone working there was getting their master's in public health and kind
Okay.
of was at a crossroad of like, I knew that I was going to get a master's. I was like, okay, I feel like that's the next option. Should I do MBA? There's an MHA, which is a master's in health administration.
Mhm.
Something I was just like, I'm just not vibing with it. And then this was like public health. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. I talked to him, kind of learned more about it. And public health was like super broad. I think he was doing epidemiology. But when I did my own research, I was just like, okay, this seems like a bit more up my alley because I think with
Mhm.
the healthcare, the business side of healthcare, and just like I was learning about having to charge people. And basically it was like the
Uh,
business that you were running was on the fact that people were sick. And just like
Yeah.
all of that just felt like icky and gross. So I was just like, that's not the vibe. So then I started looking at public health programs
Hmm.
and applied to a couple different ones and ended up going up to Boston University for that.
Nice.
And yeah, that was from 2021 to 2023. So I finished my master's there. I did public health with concentrations in policy and law on the one hand, and then also mental health and substance use. So the thread of mental health always like followed me through like all my different schooling and my different like phases of life. But then I don't know, I just feel like a lot of stuff with mental health too is like, okay, you can be like a therapist. Like that's kind of what
Hmm.
I was like, you can be like a psych nurse, like, that's what you do. And
Hmm.
of just like therapy. And the more I learned about insurance from like the administrative classes I was taking, the less likely I wanted to like deal with anything to do with insurance. So I was
Yeah.
feeling stuck in terms of like, this is my passion, like this is what I want to be doing. I don't know. On the other hand, I was just like, I feel like I should, go the corporate route, do policy. That's why I kind of always kept those two options open for me. I was like, okay, I can have policy and law. I even considered like law school for a second, but
Wow.
mental health was always kind of like, I'm like, this is what I'm super interested in, passionate about. And so I learned a lot about harm reduction when I was up in Boston.
Let's just break that down for people that don't know what harm reduction is. Can you explain what it is? Yeah.
It's basically just like different initiatives and ways that you can help reduce the amount of harm that, like, essentially people who are using drugs,
Hmm.
you're trying to mitigate the amount of harm that they are getting through those actions. Cause I think we all know, like, the war on drugs wasn't very successful in terms of
Hmm.
actually stopping people from using drugs. And also the opioid epidemic is, make
Hmm.
into another level. So we clearly, there's like a problem in this country, and pretending like it doesn't exist wasn't really working. And so I
Hmm.
think reduction is partly an answer to that by helping mitigate the amount of diseases spread and just doing like different initiatives. Like I did, there was a needle exchange program that we would
Hmm.
get in where you would get like, if people turned in dirty needles, then you would give them like clean needles, which helps to prevent the different diseases that are like intravenously
Hmm.
given to each other. And so we did that, and then also like made little kits for people who were unhoused. I volunteered at shelters. So yeah, it's basically just about reducing harm and helping people in need, which was also like drew me there as well. And I feel like I have some family members who struggle with like addiction and just like over the counter prescription medicine use. And yeah,
Hmm.
really coming from a place of like inspired by just like my childhood and my family. And then I was just like, people need this help, and people don't need to be ignored and cast out of our society and just pretended like they don't matter because they've experienced like mental health struggles in their lives.
Right, absolutely. And I think this kind of on the thread of people treating addiction like it's a personal moral failing versus like a disease and honestly truly a public health issue. I don't know, I just think it's such a shame that we individualize addiction when it's like you have typically a mental health struggle and you're trying to feel better and that's why you're using substances. So I think harm reduction is so important on so many levels, but like people are going to do drugs. Like you're not going to stop people from doing drugs. Like there's other things we can do, like making mental health resources affordable that might help with that. But
Right.
like if people are already going to be using, like let's do what we can to make sure they're not getting more harm done by like reusing dirty needles. Or I know a big part of harm reduction too is like Narcan training and making sure that like Narcan is out in the public. And so if somebody's down, that you have it. So it's just such an important initiative. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'd love to talk a little bit about, you grew up with addiction in your household. What was that like growing up and how did it kind of shape who you are?
It's interesting because I feel like when you hear the word addiction, it feels like such a heavy word, and your mind immediately goes to like one specific place when you think of someone who's struggling with addiction, when
Mhm.
in reality there's just so many ways that people could be struggling, but also it's like they've been so normalized in our society. A lot of the way that people are like drinking alcohol or using, like, I feel like now people are more aware of opioids, but even like I'm 28, I feel like even like 15 years ago, like people weren't so aware of like the problems and dangers of mixing over the counter prescription drugs with alcohol or just by themselves. I am also the middle child, but I, because of the age gap with my siblings, I have two brothers. My older
Mhm.
brother, he was 4 years older, and
Mhm.
he went to college and then moved to New York. So I would say the majority of like kind of the instability in my household started when I was like 16.
Okay.
So he was already off at college. And so I was the middle child, but for a lot of the times I was functioning as like the oldest child as well.
Yeah, okay, I was gonna say you give like eldest daughter vibes.
It's like I relate so much to all the eldest
Mhm.
daughters. And then I'm like, but I'm also a middle child and like all the middle child stuff too. So
Yeah.
that's like been really interesting once I've been out of it and kind of on my own healing journey and learning just the difference that the birth order can make within a household and how the same children in a family could have completely different childhoods. I feel like the oldest child and also just like seeing your experience in other people. So I think once I started hearing about like the eldest daughter, eldest child experience that it wasn't just me. I was like, "Oh, yeah, like, that speaks to me." But then, like, I have, like, other wounds that speak to, like, the middle child. So, just a
Mhm.
lot to unpack, a lot to unravel. I feel like took on a parentified role, my parents, but then with my younger brother as well. I feel like I felt like he was my child in a lot of the ways, and
Yeah,
so yeah.
yeah. So how does taking on that role, like being the parent, so parentified is essentially when you parent your parents or your siblings because there's that lack of leadership within, your parents or caregivers or whoever. How did that affect your mental health and your experience taking on that role as a
Yeah.
kid?
It I feel like everything, I didn't even realize the effect it was having before, and it only started, like, coming together once I started dating, and then I was seeing.
Mm. Dating is like it brings everything that's ever happened like up to a surface, I feel like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Also, when I was so young, I was like a teenager, I was just like, "What the fuck is happening? Why?" Like, I had so much anger towards my mom, I feel like, for a really long time,
Mm.
and it was kind of like, I had no idea what she had gone through, like, some of the things that I now know about her life and her childhood, I've only learned in the past 3 years, and then yeah, I feel like my dad felt very lost, and so he never wanted to be like, "I'm parentifying you," but it was just, like, the dynamic that happened, and I feel like I was wanting to be there for him and then be there for my brother, and so it just very quickly turned into this, like, unhealthy thing of, like, me knowing too much about my parents' relationship or getting in the middle,
Mm.
help my mom if she was maybe feeling because she would definitely kind of go through phases of being, like, more depressed and more low, and then phases of being, like, a bit more, like, manic, and you wouldn't really know what was going on, and
Mhm.
so, yeah, just kind of, like, inserting myself there under the pretense of being like, "Well, if I can fix this, then everything will, like, be okay," and, yeah, just
Mm.
taking on too much responsibility with it from a very young age.
Yeah, and how did that translate into your dating life?
Wow. It it was it was just the exact same thing, like, I found there's, like, multiple times where it happened where it was, like, someone who themselves were struggling with whether it was, like, drinking or whatever, and somehow I always sniffed them out, and then I was like, "I know how to handle this." I think, like, subconsciously, it was it's
Mhm.
all happened subconsciously, and so your nervous system and your body looks to recreate that same experience that you had when you were a child,
Mhm.
but with, like, a different outcome. That's the intention, but
Right.
you can't force anyone to heal or go on their own journey, and it's all so personal, and so yeah, I definitely was, like, taking on the "I can fix him" type of
Mhm.
archetype, and
Yeah.
but I think it was once
Mhm.
I was, like, more in college and even all the way up until I was living in Boston, I was just like, "Alright, I see the pattern."
Yeah, definitely. And I know I've had a similar dating pattern too of like, let me fix them because I think the subconscious message is like, if I fix you, then I'll be good enough. Or if I
Yeah.
fix you, then you'll want me around. Or then I matter to somebody because I'm useful, because I can help. And it's like, God, it's such a painful lesson because, like you said, people aren't going to change. They're not going to suddenly have a healthy relationship with substances or suddenly be taking care of themselves or have ambition just because you're dating. It's a painful road that I have been down as well. So I
Yeah.
see you on that. Yeah. So did you feel like you like broke that pattern in your dating life?
I do. I feel like I hit like a bottom, like a rock bottom where I was like, "This gotta give," give. Because
Yep.
I was living in Boston, and I'd always kind of, like for a few years at that point, I'd say for about 5 years in the back of my mind was thinking I could be bisexual, and, like,
Mhm.
I a best friend of mine who I moved up to Boston with, who she at that point, like, she had known since high school, she was bi and, like and she was kind of, like, saying to me, like, "Oh, I think that, you could be too, just from, like, what we've talked about and just how you envision your life being and what you believe and how you would want a partnership to look.
Mhm.
And that thought had never crossed my mind in high school, like not even for a second.
Well, you
And I
grew up
think
in the South, huh? I was
yes.
gonna say that definitely led to a lot of me repressing my sexual identity was because, like, my best friend in elementary school got, like, very terribly bullied for being gay. So I think subconsciously I was like, "Not an option." Like, "Nope, I don't wanna be
Yeah,
shoved, so I'm not gay,
really.
can't be gay at all."
Yeah,
Yeah.
for me, I went to, like, a pretty small high school, and there was only, like, one girl who I think only our senior year came out, and it was, like, this, like, big drama, and she even when I went to Auburn too, I mean, in Alabama, it's, like, now when
Yeah.
I go there is, like, because I feel like anywhere you go, you can find the small sector of the queer community, like, and I didn't even realize that I was doing that when I was in Auburn. Like, I went to this coffee shop that I later realized, like, was, like, the queer coffee shop. Like, it was, like, super
Yeah.
like, gay and, like, the owner,
Mhm.
queer, and they would just have, like, all of these, like, events where back then I was just like, "Oh, yeah, like, this is cool, this is my vibe." And now I'm just like, "Yeah, because like, everyone there is gay." So,
Yeah. Yeah.
that was
Hindsight makes it a lot clearer.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, I was thinking that in Boston and also being in the North and like specifically where I lived in Boston, I lived in like a little area called Somerville. It was like renowned for being like a queer neighborhood and
Mhm.
everyone around there was kind of like assumed that you were gay or it was just a very different, like, approach to it than I'd ever been
Uh-huh.
around, and at the
Mhm.
time I was working in a fine dining restaurant, like, while I was doing my master's, and then stayed on after I graduated for, like, a few extra months full time, and that's when I was like, "You know what? I'm just gonna go for it." I feel like everyone here is, like people were being like, "Oh, you're bi, right?" And, like, girls were, like, flirting with me, and I was like,
Mhm.
"Whoa, what is happening?" I remember, like, one time at this bar, this girl came up to me and she was like I think she was, like, younger because there was, like, a college around there too, and she was just like,
Mhm.
"You're gay, right? Like, no one around here is gay, and, like, I just need someone to talk to and, like, practice flirting." And I was like,
Oh my
"Oh,
gosh.
like, no, no, no." I was like, "I'm not your girl." And then, like, the
She,
woman
like,
told my
sift you out. She's like, "That one's
no,
probably gay,
right.
right?"
I was like, "What?" I was like, "What do you mean?" But, yeah, I think it was very quickly after that, I kind of was like, "You know what? Like, why not?" And I, like, switched the apps to girls. Like, I feel like it's such a progression. Like, it just takes so long to get
Yes.
like, when you first think, like, "Okay, like, maybe," and then you kinda just have to give yourself the space and time to, like, feel comfortable with it. And then I feel like it's the putting apps to girls and guys is the first step and just
Mhm.
seeing it, and yeah, it wasn't until I moved back to Atlanta when I just had, like, one final shitty dating situation with a guy that I was
Mhm.
like, "Oh, this is the universe being like, 'It's now or never, bitch.'" And so I was like, "Okay, fine."
Yeah.
So, that was, like, the fall of 2023, and I kind of had moved back to Atlanta, and I came out to my parents that November, so it
Mhm.
was 2 years ago, it was over Thanksgiving, so it just had, like,
Mhm.
the 2-year anniversary, and it
Nice,
was
nice.
definitely, like, an intimidating experience going into it. They were not
Totally.
very open-minded to it at all, but they kind of, like, had an inkling because of, like,
Mhm.
my social media and like my friend like a couple of my friends at that point that my mom followed on Instagram and stuff, like they were out and posting stuff. And
Mhm.
so when I would speak to my brothers on the side, they would kind of be like, because I told them first and I was just like, yeah, this is
Mhm.
they're like, okay, cool. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think mom and dad know. But I think it's one thing for parents to like have a thought and then for it to be like confirmed. So it
Right.
was like I told them and it was a bit of tension for, like, a little bit, but in my mind, I was like, "I you just have to rip the Band-Aid off, like, I have to get the
Mhm.
process going, and either they come around, they don't, like, I can't control their response like everything else." So
Mhm.
I told them, and then from January of 2024, I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna be super intentional about being in queer spaces. I
Mhm.
want to find the gays in Atlanta," because I was seeing on social media that there was actually a lot of gay spaces and, like, the queer scene in Atlanta was, like, pretty I mean, way bigger than I thought it was because I was like, "Oh,
Mhm.
Atlanta's really, like, a gay place," and then the more I got into it, I was just like, "Oh my god, there's, like, a lot of stuff going on, like gay bars, like sapphic bars, like, all these
Nice.
different things," and then there was I literally looked on TikTok, I remember searching, like, queer spaces in Atlanta in the search bar to, like, see what would come up,
Yeah.
and this coffee shop came up that was queer owned and like 5 minutes away from where I lived. And I was like, okay, this is cool. And then I also ended up joining a weekly soccer league, and it
Nice.
was like it's a woman non-binary league. So it isn't
Mhm.
labeled as like, this is like a queer league, but I feel like,
Mhm.
soccer, a lot of
Yeah.
gay people in that vicinity.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was super cool. I joined that in November also of that year. And then a few months later, that's actually where I met my current girlfriend playing on
Nice.
for our team. And then, yeah, and that was like, it was weird because I'd gone on, had the apps there too. And then I like went on Bumble and I went on one date with a girl. I thought we went on like a couple dates. And so that was cool because I was like, this is just a different experience. Like I didn't know what I
Mhm.
was even doing in terms of like, if I wanted more femme or more mask or STEM or all the different labels.
Mhm.
And I've always been someone, even in relationships like or like dating with men, who like, I'm never being like, oh, the man has to ask me this or do that. I'm like,
Mhm.
fuck, like I'll text you. And sometimes it
Mhm.
was like, I was like, all right, girl, like if he's not texting you, maybe you don't always have to text him. But I feel like case it was kind of like what I wanted from that and what I realized later was that like I wanted more of an equal partnership. And in
Mm.
terms of the whole sapphic relationship, I definitely wanted it to be equally pursued from both sides. And just like a 50-50 is like the best that I can
Mhm.
like just sum it up to be, where it's just everything's like a true partnership and we just feel like we do everything for the other one and just love each other. And that's been exactly what I've gotten. And I feel like I really manifested that shit so hard. Like I wrote specifically, like I was scripting, I was like doing all that type of manifestation, visualization.
Mhm.
And then when it happened, I was just like, oh my gosh. And it's been like a year and a half, but it's been feel like I've grown so much in the past year and
Mhm.
a half. Such a learning experience. And like, it's my first real relationship. And
Mhm.
so I built up so much in my head of like, at one point I was like, it's never going to happen. Like, I'm never going to be in a relationship. And that was before the whole like gay realization. And then I was like, oh, okay. I was like, we got a
Yeah.
little more life in this now. And then, yeah, I met my girlfriend and it's just been like such an amazing experience. Truly. I feel like I've learned so much and it's so crazy. Even I feel like time moves so fast, but I'm like 2 years ago from now. Oh yeah, I guess if I came out 2 years ago, like to
Mhm.
even tell that version of myself, like this is where you would be in 2 years, it would just
Mhm.
be like,
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, so many thoughts. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think that's such a powerful like testament to, coming to your own identity at any age, right? I know that I came into my sexuality like literally last year and I'm 26. So it's like 25. So I feel like I was like too old to be doing this. So
right.
what would you say to the people who maybe are questioning their sexuality or not comfortable with other people knowing about it, like who were in your shoes 2 years ago, about to come
Right.
out to your parents or other people in your life? What would you tell those people?
Feel like the first thing is like if you're questioning if you're gay or if you're bi, like then you probably are. Cause I feel like a lot of straight
Yeah. If
people
you're Googling, am I gay? Like, probably.
taking the quizzes. Always would be like, that's my girl crush. It's like, no, it's just like a crush. Like you just have a crush
Yeah.
on that girl. And so I think our society, like, it's obviously so male centered and everything is just pushed through the male gaze. So it's like, if you're even having those inklings, like, I encourage you so much to pursue it because I feel like, especially with people who are bi or pan or interested in whoever, multiple different types of people, you need to go out of your way and put the effort into dating because it's so much
Mhm.
easier to just conform and be like, well, I'll just be with the guy. Like, it's so much easier
Mhm.
to date a guy. You know, I don't want to tell my parents. Like, it just seems like such an uphill battle when you're first starting. You're just like so many things you need to tick off, and it seems like very overwhelming, but you can go at your own pace. Like, I feel like
Mhm.
take your time, don't feel rushed. I feel like if you're someone who's connected to your intuition, which is also like a muscle to like practice,
Mhm.
I you'll be able to like know when you want to like make the jump to like come out or do this or like any like of those bigger things. And I feel like just be easy with yourself, be gentle with yourself, also get the support that you need. Like I
Mhm.
was in therapy and am in therapy and like, I made a plan with my therapist about how I was going to come out to my parents. She sent me like a bunch of things to read and just provided a lot of support. So I think that's huge too. is just like
Yeah.
surround yourself with people who you know support you already, like regardless, who love you, lifts you up to then take that like nerve-wracking next step that feels so big. And then once you do it, if you make it, it makes you feel like invincible. You're like, wow, I can do
Totally.
anything.
Yeah. Have you seen this? I promise this relates, but have you seen the new Stranger Things season?
No, no, I haven't.
Oh, okay. Well, there's this scene where basically this character talks about coming out and how free you feel after. It's like you can just like float around because it's like, oh, I
Yeah,
did the hard thing. Now I can just be myself and like,
right,
you know, you're being seen as your authentic self, which is really, really exciting and empowering, but it's like so nerve-wracking right before like it happens. And then whenever it happens, you're like, oh, like whenever I came out, I was
right,
like, it was so not a big deal. And I was like, wow, I like really worked this up in my head. You talking about
right.
having a support system and a therapist reminded me of when I was first coming out. I had to come out to my therapist because my therapist didn't know. And I booked a session and I was talking about literally anything but that. And she was like,
Right.
okay, like it sounds like everything's going really well. Why are you here? Like, why? It was like the last 5 minutes. I was
You're
like,
like,
I was like, so I think I might be pansexual. And she was like, okay, hey, like, that's okay. She's like, we can talk about that. I wish you didn't wait till the last 5 minutes because we're going to have to book another session. But I remember being so nervous to even tell my therapist because I had so much like internalized homophobia built up in my subconscious. And so, yeah,
yeah,
like the more people that I told, the easier that it got. But my therapist was like my first person I told, and I was so scared. I'm like, I don't know what I thought she was going to say, but I was really nervous.
right. Well,
Uh,
because it feels like such a threat to your nervous system and just like just as it's like a basic like human need to feel like safe, and I feel like that just puts you in like such uncharted, like unsafe feelings that your body just like freaks out, and then afterwards it's kind of like a flush of release and you're like, okay,
mm-hmm.
cool.
Yeah, totally. And then I also like how you touched on finding queer spaces. So I'm just curious from your perspective, why is it important not only to have queer spaces, but to be in them and have that community as well?
Yeah, I think it's so important in kind of showing you all the different shapes and sizes and ways that a queer person can look. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like society in general, but even I feel like even within the queer community at times, it could be like queer people can be put in like a box that you have to like look this way or have these beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the deeper I've gotten in the queer community and just met more people from like me being open and sharing my story and then other people sharing their stories is that no person ever, like regardless of your sexuality or anything, has to like look a certain way, believe a certain thing. And so yeah, I think it's like being in queer spaces, you're all there. You have that shared experience being like a queer person, but you just get to
Mm-hmm.
learn from their experience. And I think that that is so beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the representation, seeing what's out there, and also like having that like safe space to feel like I can talk about my experiences. I know that these people might relate to me, which is really valuable as part of your identity. Okay, so how do you think sexuality and personal development are related? How are they interconnected?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I feel like they're super connected. Like when I first moved back to Atlanta, that's where I was like, okay, it was all intertwined for me. I was like, I have to figure out the sexuality and I have to start healing, figuring out what's going on because the patterns that had been repeating in my life and what I had been experiencing, it just was not leading me anywhere I wanted to go. So I was like, okay, clearly something needs to change. I need to
Mm-hmm.
switch it up. And so at that point, like I tried therapy a little bit, but nothing really like stuck too much. But
Mm-hmm.
I moved back, I didn't have like a full-time job yet. So I was like, I'm taking this time to fully dive in
Mm-hmm.
and just like figure out what the fuck is happening. And I knew so
Yeah.
much had to do with like my childhood and that experience. And so I just started like looking things up and listening to podcasts and just consuming as much as I could in terms like Body Keeps the Score, all
Mm-hmm.
these different personal development podcasts, learning about somatic stuff, like different psychology, meditation. Like I was just doing all the things and
Mm-hmm.
definitely found, you can't do everything. So I tried it all. And then I was like, okay, this stuff works for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like it really all just like naturally flowed together so well in that the more I felt I knew myself or I learned about myself and created the space for like parts that I had never connected to in the past,
Mm-hmm.
the more I got like this full picture of who I was. And I felt like empowered to step into being like, yeah, like I am bisexual, I am creative, I am, all these other things. Cause I feel like for me too, a huge part of it was at some point when I'd moved back, I figured out that I was like, I'm not going the traditional corporate path. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
just can't do that. I tried to apply for just different jobs and then I wasn't hearing anything back. So I was like, that's a sign. So I was like, okay, clearly that's not supposed to be my path. So I started like figuring out what else I could do. But then I had a huge limiting belief that had been in the back of my mind my whole life that I wasn't creative. And that because I did like school, I was really good in school. I like played sports and I was like, I'm not creative. And so that really I feel like bogged me down for a long time. So once I kind of got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm not doing this traditional
Mm-hmm.
societal path of working in corporate and finding my like worth and value through those systems. So let me, look internally and figure something else out. And then I started finding like, Kayla skinny dipping podcasts and all the other
Mm-hmm.
like kind of like we are inherently creative beings. Like if you feel like you're not creative, it's just because you're not connected to your creativity. And also
Mm-hmm.
creativity doesn't look one certain way. It doesn't just mean you draw or you paint or you photography. Like it could be podcasting, it could be roller skating, it could be, puzzling, journaling, like all these different things are
Mm-hmm.
creative outlets.
Mm-hmm.
I think I just had such a narrow view of what that meant. And also, I think that came up for me because I also knew that a stereotype of a queer person was to be kind of creative. And so I feel like that
Yeah.
was like a rub for me because I was like, well, it just wasn't like connecting. I was like, I'm queer, but I'm not creative. And I don't know, it was in my head, it just wasn't sitting right. So I was like, you know what, like I am creative. And that's when I kind of started my own or my first creative endeavor, which was a podcast that I started. And
Mm-hmm.
then that kind of just taken different forms over the past couple of years and landed me now with my business being cosmically aligned coaching. And I'm starting to flesh out, like it had always been under the themes of mental health and personal growth and all the
Mm-hmm.
different tools that I've used on my own journey, whether that was like astrology or classic psychology and somatic stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
just wanting to create a resource for someone who is in the position I was 2 years ago, who was feeling so confused, didn't know where to start, overwhelmed by all the different things that they had to address in their lives and like help people through that journey because it can be so confusing and it can take a lot out of someone. And like I said before, support is just the more support you can have in like every capacity in your life, like the more successful I feel like you're going to be.
Yeah, totally. And I want to touch back on a theme that you were talking about as you were sharing about all that stuff is like self-acceptance is such a key part of the healing journey, especially when it comes to your queer identity, but like honestly any part of you. I don't know if you're familiar with internal family systems. It's like a type of
Yes,
therapy. Yeah. Yeah.
internal family systems. And I listened to your episode about it as well because I saw that you had that. This is amazing.
Yeah, because I noticed when you were saying there, like, there's parts of me that I hadn't really talked too much. I was like, it sounds like internal family systems where it's like you accept all of these parts of yourself. And I always use the analogy of a disco ball, but it makes up this beautiful, like, mirrored sphere of all of these little parts of you. And if
Right.
you're hiding some of them away, like the light's not going to bounce off in the way that it's meant to. And so it's
Right.
really accepting all of these parts of you, the parts that maybe society doesn't accept, or maybe they're hard for you to love, and that's really
Yeah.
like pivotal because that's who you are, right? So it's like we're accepting it, and then that way you can learn from it and just show up confidently as your true self. So I think I'm so glad that you talked about that because that's such a key component to it. So, and I also love what you're doing now with your coaching is you're helping basically the version of you 2 years ago, which I think is such a valuable way to serve other people, is learning through your own experiences and kind of helping be a guide and helping support them. So
Right.
how did you step into coaching? Because I know I kind of like the tangents started flowing after you graduated with your master's degree, and then how did you step into coaching?
Yeah. I think so when I first came back, I was looking at kind of like harm reduction jobs. And I'm also like really interested in psychedelic assisted therapy. I think that's super cool. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but those were like the jobs that just like weren't happening. And it was like so frustrating. And I think that was also kind of like a pivotal experience for someone who had found their value through like external validation and like getting into the program and being in like a great and getting all A's and all that. And now all of a sudden I was like, all that and I can't even get a job. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
very like confronting.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time too, I had like kind of come back and another like big motivator for me to get in the mental health field was I also wanted to be able to like help my mom and more from more of like an informed place and just like
Mhm.
other people in my life. And so I was kind of helping my family through that time, like in
Mhm.
2023, understand kind of why all this had happened and use the knowledge that I had gained to explain it to them. And then things started like clicking, especially like for my dad. And he was kind of just like, wow, like you have so much knowledge around this. Like you can really help people. He was like, you're going to write a book. Like this is amazing. And why I feel like they weren't understanding what I was learning about or trying to do. So that also was like
Mhm.
a big fear too, where I was just like, yeah, you see, like mental health is very important. I feel like trying to tell
Mhm.
like men, boomer aged men, it's like you really need to take care of your mental health. So
Yeah.
once clicking, I was just like, yeah, like this is what I want to do and I want to help people and I do have all this knowledge and like it helped me. And so I'm like, what should I do with it? And I was like, I don't want to go back to school again to like do like whatever degree I would need to like be a therapist. And so I was like, I can't
Right.
do school. Like I have loans. I went basically straight from undergrad to grad school. I was like, I need
Mhm.
some like experience. So then once I started dating my girlfriend, she has her own business
Mhm.
and she does like healthcare hiring and recruiting and leadership management stuff. That's the first person my age that I kind of saw with their own business. And
Mhm.
I'd grown up with being entrepreneurs. They have restaurants. And
Mhm.
so I had seen that as a child, but only in that capacity and never really
Mhm.
like thought of that being an option for me in terms of like coaching or like starting my own business where I like counsel or, walk people through their healing journeys. And
Mhm.
so I was like, "All right, fuck it. Like, I'm just gonna figure it out. I'm gonna start creating stuff. I'm gonna, go online. I feel like we can learn anything online, make
Yeah.
connections, meet people, put a curriculum together. It first started as like a book. I was like, I just need to like get all this information out. And so I just
That's how
was like,
mine started too. I was like, "I'm writing a book about it."
oh my god, that's so funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just was like going, 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 and that was like this time last year. And
Okay.
then like the name kind of came to me and then the framework that I use, which is like the Align framework, that was what I was basing the book chapters off of. So it's
Oh, cool.
awareness, letting go, introspection, growth, and nurture. That was like the Align framework that I created to kind of as like phases that people go through in this
Yeah.
journey. And so then I was like, okay, cool. I was writing that and then I was like just seeing what other people were doing online with social media and content creation and making either like courses or containers and one-on-one things. So I was like, okay, let me take that and try to condense it down into like either like a group container or like a course. And so then I came out in August of this year with my like Align starter kit course. And so
Nice.
that launched and that was super exciting. And then now I've just been like kind of further honing like my messaging and all the businessy side of stuff, like my ideal clients, problem aware, symptom aware, all of the like the marketing jargon. But
Yes.
yeah, so now I've basically created because I feel like the Align framework is so good in terms of like a general overview, but I feel like people really needed to be spoken to in a very like specific way and kind of like called out. So to kind of deepen that even more, I created these unmasked archetypes and it's
Mhm.
basically 6 different emotional masks that we wear like in our adult life that are based off
Mhm.
of our childhood conditioning and kind of what happened to
Mhm.
us when we were kids and they've like caused us to then act a certain way as an adult. And so it's
Mhm.
kind of like further made it into like silos where if you're someone who like us, the archetype for I think if like I'm going off of what you've told me, it's called like the
Yeah.
loop and you just repeat
Yes.
the same pattern and the same person over and over
Mhm.
again. And then there's the chameleon who they kind of like change with their environment and they've never felt like safe to be who they are. So they're like different depending on who they're with and like who they're in front of.
Mhm.
Fortress is someone who kind of has like walls put up so high and they just never they were taught that it's like dangerous to even engage in like any type of attachment with someone else so they just kind of haul themselves away up in their little castle. And yeah, so I kind of figured that having those more specific archetypes would really help people connect to the work even more and see themselves in that to then be like, okay, I need to go through this process and get the journey started.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And yeah, I did take that quiz and I did get the loop and it was a very great resource. The visually beautiful. Yeah. And then it was also
Okay.
great to learn that information about myself too.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so I know that I can link that in the show notes of the episode too, so people can find those
Yeah.
things as well. And
Yes.
before we start wrapping up, we have to talk about astrology. I'm like, I need
No,
to know because like you're the astrology girl. When did you get into it? Why is it important? Like maybe there's some skeptics listening. I know my dad listens. He's
yeah.
not big on astrology, but it's because he's a Taurus. Okay, so it's like
Oh,
so let's
same.
get into it.
Same, like, girl.
Yeah. So go ahead. Why is it like how has it helped you in your journey? Why is it important?
Yeah, so it was so huge in my journey. I feel like it had always been something I was interested in. I knew like my sun sign, like the basics that everybody knows. I'm a Virgo. And
Mm-hmm.
that's all I really knew up until like 2 years ago. And then I think just like my algorithm, I think because also, it's the stereotypes. I feel like astrology, gay people, like that's also another one. And so I was just
Totally.
like all the
You're like, I have to get
this.
into this
So,
now.
yeah, exactly. It's my calling. Like I just wouldn't, it would be fake of me. So I found Chani Nicholas. She's an amazing astrologer, and she has a really cool book that I got, but also she has an app and she makes videos, and a lot of her resources are free as well. But I think my TikTok was just serving me a lot of astrology stuff, and I was like, okay, let me just give this a go because people were saying it
Mhm.
could be helpful in personal development because essentially you know your sun sign, but someone is so much more than just their sun sign. And so that's
Mhm.
where you have your whole natal chart, which is like your birth
Mhm.
chart. So if you've ever gotten an astrology reading, you probably know that. Or if you have like an astrology person in your life and they're asking you for your like birthday, time, and location of
Mhm.
your birth, it's because they're trying to your birth chart. And yeah, so basically it's like a snapshot of the sky the second that you were born and like came earthside. And that's why like the minute that you were born is very critical because your like rising sign changes every 2 hours. So it's like
Mhm.
based on the location in the world, the time of year. The big three that people talk about is your sun and your moon and your rising. And
Mhm.
then there are also other planets on your birth chart, and it'll be Mercury, Mars, Venus, and then there's also Pluto, I think, like Jupiter,
Yeah, I
and
think
maybe one more.
Neptune,
Yeah, yeah,
maybe.
Neptune.
I don't
And those are more like
know.
generational planets. They like move every
Mm.
like 25 years or like 43 years or something more crazy. So they affect like generations, whereas,
Yeah.
the sign changes every month and then the moon is every 2 days and then the rising is like every couple hours.
Yeah.
So basically I learned about that, and your sun is kind of like the core of who you are, and then your moon is kind of your emotional side and who you are like inside. And then your rising is like, people say it's like how you present to other people. It's kind of like first impression vibes. Sometimes people say it's like a mask that you wear. But I know a lot of people like to emphasize that it's like more than that. It's kind of like your soul's journey is like
Mm.
getting to be like the most evolved version of you is kind of exhibiting like all the positive signs of your rising sign, or it's like
Oh,
your most
interesting.
authentic self when you are kind of leaning into the characteristics of the rising sign.
Yeah, okay, interesting. I'm a Libra rising, so I'm like when I'm really charismatic, right? Like I don't know too much about Libras.
I was just gonna say I know like Libra is like a flirty sign, so I don't know if you like
Yeah.
feel
Yep,
like
there it
when
is.
yeah.
Something that I think is really cool too, not only about astrology, but human design. I know that, so I got my whole family to send the human design charts because I was like, I need to know. And the same thing, it asks you the date and time and the location. And my dad, who's a skeptic, he's gonna love this. He listens to my show like every every episode. He's like one of the first people. But he's like, does the time really matter? And I looked into this because, anyways, I was in this big human design workshop, but the person leading it said
Love you.
that the reason the time matters is because at that certain time is when the stars are like shedding their material, and it comes down like, yeah, I know, I'm sure you've heard like, oh, we're made up of starlight and stardust and all this stuff, but we
Yes.
we are, right? And so the reason why the time
Mhm.
matters is because the stars are like shedding some of their like energetic weight. And so at
Right.
different times is when different materials come into you as a person. So like you're made up of different components of stardust than people born like me and my twin. I'm a twin and she's born 15 minutes before me. And our human design charts are a little bit different because it's enough to where there's a gap. And I just think that's really cool. So if people
That's
are
so
like,
yeah.
yeah, if people are like, oh man, it's just like the date and time, like, no, it's literally what the stars were doing when you were born and like what star components you're made up of. So that's why it matters. I thought that was cool. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that, and that's also I feel like astrology dates back so long ago too, and I feel like so many, like, ancient civilizations used it, and it's, like,
Mhm.
all the stuff, the Greek mythology, and just I feel like it's something that's kind of, like, tangible in the sense that you can see if you look in, like, a telescope, you can see these different planets, like, you can see the moon, we have, like, full moons, new moons, you can
Mm,
see when you can see the different and so that's why I'm like, this is like, we know energy is a real thing and everything is made up of
mhm.
energy and, like, these kind of, like, move and it affects the energy of the world, and that's why I feel like people as humans are get kind of so self-indulged in it, and I'm like, it's so helpful for yourself, but then it's also really
Mhm.
helpful general to understand, like, the climate of the world, and something that was so cool for me was when Pluto moved like, now Pluto just moved into Aquarius, and it was in
Mhm.
Capricorn before,
Mhm.
and Capricorn was, like, height of capitalism, like, Capricorn is just it's very ambitious, driven, like, financially motivated, like, hardworking, like, that's the
Mhm.
characteristics of a Capricorn, but
Mhm.
for, like, a whole generation that, like, translate to, kind of us being in the peak of capitalism like we are now, whereas
Mhm.
Aquarius is more, like, for the people. It's more like intellectual, it's futuristic, it's intelligent, and very, very like group, like highlighting the group over the individual, which is like
Okay.
completely contrast. And
Yeah.
so like the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, it was like the French Revolution, the American
Okay,
Revolution,
yes,
like
I've
all
heard
of
about this. Yeah, like in the
yeah,
cosmos, it's time to revolt. This is what I'm hearing. It's
right,
time to rise
exactly.
against. Yeah. Yeah. Okay,
And that's
super
why like
cool.
looking at the patterns in history when the different planets were in these signs as well and just seeing like the similarities that were happening hundreds of years apart or, a couple years apart
Mhm.
depending on the planet's movement. I feel like
Mhm.
that's so fascinating and like a way that for skeptics you can be like, how do you explain that?
Yeah, so true, so true. Oh, I'm glad we touched on that because 'cause I'm like, we need to, like, we need to. Okay, Gabby, I'm
Yes.
gonna start with the checkout questions that I ask all my guests. It's been such a treat to have you on the show. I'm so happy that we did this. And okay, spoiler alert for all the guests, but this is Gabby's first guest podcast. She's had her own show, but this is her first time being on a new one. So I think you did really good.
It is.
Okay, what is something that people often get wrong about you?
Okay, so I don't know. I think about this a lot because I feel like maybe in a different time period of my life was like maybe people are getting things wrong about me because I was not like living in my full like purpose or I hadn't even figured stuff out about me. So I feel like, when I had like a big partying phase and I feel like the people then didn't
Mhm.
realize that I was had this like intellectual side of me as well. And then but now I feel like I'm truly living in like a very authentic version of myself where I hope
Mm.
that is, like, shining through a lot, and so I would say that is, like, mainly my answer, but then also something that I, like, thought of as well is that I feel like because I am a Sagittarius rising, and that has to do with
Mhm.
a lot of, like, optimism and, like, lightheartedness, and it's also philosophical, but I think kind of the way I come off, a lot of people wouldn't think that I have been through some, like, hardship and, like, some very
Mm.
difficult times and some dark periods, and so I think that oftentimes surprises people when I do share that with
Yeah, because 'cause you're this positive, optimistic person, but it's like, "No, I've been to the trenches too. I'm just, like, not letting that weigh me
right,
down." Yeah, totally, totally.
exactly.
And what is something that you wish you could go back and tell your younger self?
I would tell my younger self that it's worth the wait and that
Mm.
she feel like so lost and confused and angry and unsure why everything is happening, but everything comes together. Like just keep on doing what you're doing. And yeah, it's worth the wait. And I'm proud
Oh,
of you.
that's cute. Oh, I'm proud of you. Oh, that's cute. If you could make a law that everybody has to follow, what would it be and why?
Okay, I would make it so everyone, well, I guess the basis of the law would be that you're not allowed to have like black and white thinking, have to
Mm,
be
I would be
open-minded.
arrested.
And
I try not to, but my brain just defaults to it. Okay, so no black and white
no, I
thinking
understand.
and yeah.
Yeah, people have to be open-minded and consider situations from multiple perspectives.
Yeah, so it's like have
That
empathy.
would be exactly.
How radical. Okay.
I know, right?
Then, the best mental health advice you have to share.
I think I feel like this it kind of airs more like personal development, but something that I think is so good to remember is I don't know if you're familiar with the fig tree excerpt from Sylvia Plath and the Bell Jar.
It sounds like vaguely familiar, but go ahead and explain it. Yeah.
Okay. Read this like a couple years ago and like immediately started crying and got a fig tattoo like a few weeks later. And so I was like, this is my personality. But it's basically the idea that like in the book, she writes like, in my life, like I'm sitting under this like beautiful, lively fig tree, and I look down all the different branches and I see these like juicy figs that represent all the different possibilities and directions that my life could take. She's like, one fig is like, I teach English and travel all around the world. The other fig is, I go through academia and get all of these degrees and learn all this. And then this other fig is I live on a farm and I have a bunch of kids and I have my family and basically all these different wants that she would like love to experience. But she's like, I wait so long to pick one that they all like shrivel up and die in front of me.
Mm,
And so life can seem so overwhelming and there's limitless opportunity and possibilities that we can do. But it's so important to at least take steps towards one and then like
mhm,
see if that's the right fit and how, try it on for size, especially I'd say like through your 20s. This is like a huge thing
mhm.
to remember in your 20s. You can always pivot. If that fig ends up tasting rotten and you don't like it, you can go down a different branch and like pull another
Mhm.
fig. And the thing is just to make the choice and keep going like one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I love that so much because there's infinite possibilities for all the different things that we could choose for our life. But I like how that metaphor says, if you sit there and you wait, oh, is it this one? Is it this one? The figs are gonna shrivel up and die. So
Mm.
like make a choice, and you know what? If you start to hate the taste, you can toss it and try a new one. But like basically just go for it. Even if you don't love it, you can always try something new. But like for me, I so often think that I would so much more regret the things that I don't do versus the things that I do. At least if I do something and it's a total failure, I'm like, hey, I tried. I never have to sit up and wonder,
Right.
stay up late and wonder, what if I did that thing? Like I'm always gonna go for it. So I love that metaphor. And I've heard of it before, so that's really cool.
Yeah. Thing about regret, I think I just read something like today that was like, I'd rather say like, I can't believe I did that rather than I wish I did that. And that really stuck with me as
Exactly.
well.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Okay, cool. And the last piece is just plug yourself. Where can we find you and how can we support you?
Yes. So my Instagram is going to be underscore cosmically aligned. And then on TikTok as well, Gabby underscore CAC. I post like a bunch of short form content on there I'm going to start a series coming up where I kind of do personal growth one-on-one and like talk about some of the words and the jargon that I feel like I definitely throw around and other people throw around that people may not even like understand, like core wounds, limiting beliefs, emotional patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a couple different series going on there. And yeah, I'm definitely going to launch the Unmasked group container sometime next year.
Cool.
I'm starting to like flesh that out. If
Nice.
you're interested in finding out which emotional mask you wear, anyone listening, you can go on my Instagram and click the quiz, or if Sydney puts it in the
I'll
show
link
notes
it
as
too, yeah.
well. And yeah, you'll be in my world and start learning more about the offers as it develops.
Yay! Oh my gosh, Gabby. Well, thank you so much for your time. I loved the journey of everything that we talked about. And any last words before we sign off that you want to share with the listeners?
I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity. Like, I love your podcast. I love the message. I feel like it's so fun. I'm really grateful for the opportunity because I think it's like, I don't know, it's so cool just as like young women, queer women, just connecting and like sharing this
Hmm.
message. It's so powerful. So thank you for everything that you do and for giving me this space to come on.
Yeah, of course. Well, thanks for coming on.